Alright, so we're finally back with another game of 60 Grassy, and yeah, for a while I was not too bothered to getting more of these, but people keep telling me to make them, and they send across a lot of their videos, and I actually had a few games that I was going to commentate that wasn't actually mine, but what happened was, I don't know if it's my laptop or Arcanists 2 in general, but those replays sat in my folder for quite some time and they ended up getting corrupted. So, a bit of a disaster there, but pulled up, I guess, one of the games that I recently played, which I felt was quite a good game. It's a game against Cryo. We're both using mixed books here, and it's a game that Cryo actually ends up winning against me. It's been quite some time since I've last played against Cryo, and I think he plays this game exceptionally well. Um, I think a few points to really highlight is how he actually ends up breaking stall. I know, stalling has been a topic that everyone sort of talked about in a while, and this is also the patch with when seasons just came out. So with the new monarchs that have come into the game, and he actually, yeah, he does an exceptional job of playing against monarchs and everything else. I think it's probably one of the best games I've seen from him in quite some time. So anyway, I'm playing a mixed book with flight, monarchs. I don't have any aerials, so everything else is fairly standard in terms of swarm, dark knight, so on. But anyway, um, on the last turn I could have flashed down this way instead of summoning the monarchs, but I decided to bring out the monarchs instead because I figured he'd probably mud them, or he'd probably try kill them. So he muds them here. It makes things a little bit awkward, but I don't mind too much since he sort of gives me terrain to cover up this side. So, given that I sort of start the game in the water, I summon a storm myself and he actually muds me, so I'm fairly behind at this point, so I'm okay to play a little bit defensive, and his mud actually, helps me out a fair bit in doing that. So I don't mind him mudding my monarchs, and if anything, if I need to kill them later, I can always just flash this open. So, but yeah, I guess later on, as we progress into the game, I won't talk too much, but there's a few turns where I think Cryo makes some really, really good plays, and I think they're a little bit counterintuitive. When you see it, it probably makes sense, but when you're in the moment, you might not think to do something like that. But it's plays like that that really sort of that allow you to break stall. But I mean, we'll talk about it when we get there. So here he takes one of my monarchs. He zombies it. At this point, I'm still not too concerned. I mean, he takes one of my monarchs, which is trapped, and I'm actually pretty glad for that because I had I wouldn't have been able to access that minion slot. He pops the aura here, so he reveals aura. Cryo really likes running aura, and honestly, aura is really effective in terms of breaking stall. And his aura there hits my tower, it hits the Pegasus, and it hits the Swarm. So, I mean, the reason why aura is so good at, I guess, breaking stall is because it limits space. So, limiting space against the defensive player is going to be a pretty big factor that I guess we'll see throughout the course of this game as well. Cryo's running fairly standard as well. I mean, him showing Mudball pretty much reveals he's got Mega Boulder, and I can kind of safely assume he doesn't have Shock Shield. He also has Aura, but at this point he hasn't shown Pebbles or he hasn't shown a couple of other things, so I don't know if he's still running Dark Knight. I hop up there to drain the Pegasus because it was on 26 HP, so after I drain the Peg, it goes below 15 from the Aura, so on my turn I can turn into a zombie Pegasus if he doesn't kill it. The alternative play for him, of course, is to fly down here and swarm the Peg, and I mean, I thought of this as well. It's just I didn't mind him doing this, right? I could have drained his Peg, and the Peg dies, and it's all fine, and it traps the, it keeps the Swarm trapped. But I decided not to kill the Peg, and the reason why is because, one, the Peg is trapped. It doesn't really pose too much of a threat to me, especially if I'm trying to play defensive. The other thing is that this Peg actually kills his own Swarm, and I didn't want him to have another Swarm. I'd rather him have a zombie Peg, so I just left it as is. He goes for an interesting play here. He just drains me and, makes me hit my own swarm, so it deals 60 damage. And that's, things like that. I feel like I don't know how to commentate on that one, because I know Cryo is quite focused on controlling through damage, whereas I probably would have went for that flash last turn instead of draining. But I think one thing he said during the game was he wanted to get the peg to a certain amount of health where I couldn't kill it with Pebble Shot, so that's probably why he went for that drain instead. So this turn here is just one thing to note very, very quickly. I treed Cryo thinking he might flash this open, and he'll probably need 1 or 2 flashes to free both himself and the Monarch. So if he did that, this tree would have bought 2 turns, because if I treat him and then he flashed again, or something similar, this tree would have been, a 1-turn commitment from me, but a 2-turn commitment from him. But Cryo knows that, I guess, having hit it with both auras, the tree's going to die the turn after. So instead of burning 2 flashes, he just pops the aura here. And it makes things a little bit awkward. It means that, I have to move things around, which is not that bad, but he ends up getting an aura on all 3 of my minions, and I keep flashing down. And now that the tree's dead, he can flash this open instead. And you might say, well, at the end of the day, isn't it pretty similar which way you do it? Kind of, because what would have happened, let's suppose that he didn't use this aura last turn, and he flashed, and even if he got the flash out in 1 turn, so he flashed, I flashed, and he pops the aura, the aura would have only hit the Pegasus once, whereas because he cast it last turn, it's already hit the Peg twice, so the amount of chip damage that it's bringing in is accelerated, I guess you could say. So it's little things like that where you begin to apply pressure earlier that I think is a big factor in terms of breaking Storm. Now, his peg is still trapped here, so there's not much he can do. I mean, one play that, if I was him, what I would be doing here is probably start flashing in. Or if he has Pebble Shot, I would start Pebble Shotting here. So instead he goes for the tree on the swarm, which is probably fine as well. And one thing you'll notice is that this tree limits my space, right? It limits my access back to this area. And with tree and aura, I'm pretty much holed up in this little section here. The other thing to really keep in mind is that Cryo has Mega Boulder. At this very moment, it doesn't come into play as much, just because I'm on a healthy amount of HP, but later on it definitely becomes a significant factor. This Monarch as well actually ends up being super annoying, especially given, it's a zombie Monarch, it's on a crap ton health, there's no real way for me to kill it. And I think one of the weaknesses of Monarch is, ironically, one of its strengths as well, which is Monarch is it's a really strong summon, but when it's at 40 HP, it's quite awkward because your opponent can take it quite easily. So if you get your Monarch stolen, which actually happens in most games, especially if you're going second, they end up getting this abomination, which is practically unkillable and causes a lot of issues. And look, we have a lot of people on the new boat feature on the side here. Anyway, I decided to go to the side, and some people might say, well, why are you, side hiding so early? Because it's only turn 16, right? And trust me, I'm not side hiding early because I want to. I practically have to, because at this point, Cryo's got 4 minions out on the map. I had a trapped swarm. There was literally nowhere else I could have really gone on the map without being, just trapped by Monarchs, trapped by Pegasus. So I wanted to establish this side relatively early and start playing in a defensive spot, because I just wasn't able to compete, top of the map. This was a little bit awkward. Ideally, I wouldn't have placed the Pegasus so low. If I put it a bit higher, it would have given me a bit more space. But, I also kind of wanted him to put his Pegasus at this exact location, because what I can now do is, I'll go up there with the Ice Shield and trap this Pegasus here. And this does 2 things, right? I think, one thing that people don't watch out for as much is they always put their peg to block the peg, but this actually makes it worse because I'll just pause it very quickly. With a peg in the way, it's actually worse than if this was just a block of terrain. Because if you pebble shot down, you can't pebble shot through the Pegasus, especially when it's your own Pegasus and it's got 240 health, meaning this block of terrain is permanently there. So, being able to counter trap your opponent's Pegasus in is generally a very, very good way to play defensively and continue stalling. So, I was hoping for that. We did end up achieving that. And let's see how, I guess, Cryo, or what Cryo does in order to try and break this as well. Now, the thing here is, I think Cryo pebble shots, and this seems like a very obvious thing, but I guess when you're ahead, and especially with how ahead Cryo is, I mean, he's 4 minions, right? You want to, especially when they start stalling, you want to start pushing your advantage as soon as you can and give them, limited time in order to develop and build up. Because let's say he didn't pebble that turn and he flashed or something similar, I would have been able to get up a swarm or summon monarchs or something similar, and just gives me a lot more time to play defensively. So I end up coming up here, I summon the monarch, and the thing is, I fly all the way up to summon these monarchs because if he didn't do that pebble shot, I could have just summoned him down here. But since I know he has Mega Boulder, I can't do that because he'll Mega Boulder and then I'll die or my Pegasus will die or whatever it is. So it's not an ideal position. Anyway, I still have one of my swarms trapped on the side, so it's not the greatest position for me. But at this point, I'm fairly healthy. I don't know if he has Dark Knight yet. I don't think so. So yeah, it's not too bad currently. So he decides to go for the flash. I guess he wants to free up his zombie Pegasus, and it's moves like these, right? Because this flash is a very, it seems like this seems like a bad move, or it might seem like a bad move, but this move is exceptionally well done. And the reason why it's so good is because, let's suppose if he didn't go for this flash, the alternative he could have gone for is maybe he could have hit me with a Mega Boulder, right? And let's suppose it does max damage. It brings me down to 100 health or 90 health. What would I do at that point, right? This tree would still exist. There'll be a little hole here. I just plug it up with a monarch. I fly down. I walk down. I tower up, or I could even go over here, double drain the swarm, and then I'd be back to like 150, right? So, and then he would only have one Mega Boulder left. So, and the thing is that this zombie Pegasus would be trapped the entire time. So if I do actually kill the swarm, let's say, and I drain one of the monarchs, and I'm on a healthy amount of HP, all he has left on the top of the board is a monarch and a Pegasus, and that's honestly not very threatening. So I guess he needed an active threat on top of the board. So, and he knew that, I guess, killing or at least freeing the Pegasus is important enough to not immediately rush me. And it's plays like that where you play slow, or you play it's like a push and pull analogy. I don't know if that's the best way to phrase it, but you sort of you don't overextend, right? You sometimes have to pull back a little bit in order to break stall in the most effective way. If you're always trying to push forward, you're not going to have a very good time. So I just decided to drain the swarm here because I'm fairly worried. I blast from the past and I free up the swarm, but he ends up blocking it with the monarch anyway. And then what he does here, which is probably a mistake on my end, is he ends up swarming both myself and the monarch. And I mean, it's a very simple thing, but I could have stood a little bit further away to prevent that from happening. So if he were to swarm, he would just hit the monarch and not me. But yeah, that's fine. So here's a very, very small thing. I mean, that swarm there is first of all, it's never getting out, especially if he has a zombie monarch in the way. It's just going to make his monarchs bigger. So what I do is I fly over with my monarch and I just flutter it to get rid of it. Like there's no point having a dead minion slot, especially one that's trapped. And I think, just be more lenient. Lenient's not the right word, but be more active in getting rid of your own swarms when you don't need them. So what I do here, and it might look really questionable, I guess, is I'm about to drain this. Yeah, I drained the swarm straight away, and people might look at this and say, "Well, why why did you just do that?" He can easily flash you off here, and I think this is one of the very rare scenarios where flashing someone off is actually the wrong play, right? If, let's say, for example, he didn't flash me off and he traps me with the Pegasus and the Monarch, what would I do on my turn? I actually wouldn't be able to do anything. I could summon a Pegasus, but there's a way that he could position his minions that I probably couldn't even summon a Pegasus. So, I would probably end up teleporting on my turn if he trapped me here with all of his minions. The other thing is, if he flashes me off, that deals 15 damage to me, and then on my turn I use Arcane Gate. So a different way of thinking about that turn is, let's say, for example, if he flashes me off in our Arcane Gate here, if we think about the sequence of events of what happens, I drained the swarm and I killed the swarm by standing here. I took 15 damage, and then I teleported here. So basically, at the expense of 15 health, I killed a swarm, and I ended up here. If you compare that to, imagine if I was standing here and I casted a 25 damage aerial, like a Sky Ray or something, and it kills the swarm, it's actually effectively the same thing, right? It's just that I lost 15 health and I lost Arcane Gate, which isn't actually very relevant. Arcane Gate's not very relevant in this game. So basically, I was hoping he would flash me off. What he does here, though, is actually much better than flashing me off, and one thing that I didn't think about, and you'll see it in a second. So first of all, he blasts from the past the peg, and he's going to do that the following turn to free it as well, which is not very, it's a bit problematic for me. And then what he does is he Mega Boulder suicides me off the map. I was pretty surprised he actually made it. It's pretty close in terms of what he does, but that makes my play bad because, instead of paying 15 health to kill that swarm, I just paid 100 and something health, right? And I think people will say, oh, but he himself lost 100 HP. Yeah, but it doesn't really matter because he had 100 protection shield. He had a HP to spend. I'm the one who's playing defensive, so when you're aggressive, you should use your health pool aggressively as well. So on this turn, I actually think he could have just came over here, blast from the past at this, and chucked a Mega Boulder at me. And honestly, if he did that, chances are I would have been pretty screwed. I might have just died straight up to the Mega Boulder. And he actually ran out of time, so he ended up using Protection Shield, which is really good for me. But it's a little bit unfortunate for Cryo that he ran out of time on this exact turn. So I end up treeing him here, and the reason why is because if he flashes this open, I can block it again with the Monarch. So once again, it's about, I guess, that turn efficiency part where I spend one turn treeing, and he has to spend one turn flashing open the tree, but then he also has to kill the Monarch. So the tree itself buys me like 1 or 2 turns in total. The other thing is, when he flashes open this tree, it gives me an opportunity to drain him, the tree, and the Monarch for 90 HP. I decide not to do that. I think I decided not to do that because of a slight mistake. I think I thought he still had Dark Knight. Because I assumed he had Ice Shield or something similar. Anyway, I don't decide to do it. It's fine either way. Like it's fine either way. So anyway, he just ends up killing the little Monarch here. So I see that he's in the Aura of Decay from his Pegasus. So I want him to stay in it a little bit longer. So I summon the Swarm just to hit him a bit more. and eventually break him out of protection shield, because if he's not in protection shield, it actually makes my job of stalling a fair bit easier. So, I mean, this is just a one turn, like a one turn stall, because I didn't really have anything to do this turn. I was sort of waiting for my Pegasus to come off cooldown. I was waiting for protection shield, all that sort of stuff. This blast from the past, I was hoping to kill this Monarch, but it doesn't die, which really sucks. And you can really see, I guess, the problem I'm having at the moment is I'm on 109 HP, which is not a lot. It's dead to Mega Boulder. So him having the second Mega Boulder is causing a lot of problems for me, essentially. So anyway, I continue down. Once again, he's got 4 out of 4 minions here. I think there's a few lines of play he could do here, right? He could sink one of the Monarchs and continue developing, as in he could summon an extra swarm. Doing so will give me a little bit of breathing room, right? Because, you know, I can then summon my own swarm, I can then summon Monarchs, I can have a bit of time to relax, so he doesn't want to do that, and he, I guess, keeps up the pressure with Purple Shot. So it's things like that you know, sometimes people might decide a protection shield, or they might decide to flash or whatever it is and try to get their zombie Pegasus in, whereas Pebble Shot is a much more direct way of applying pressure to your opponent. And I think the other thing as well is you'll notice that during the entirety of this game I'm being slowly pushed down and down, and the fact that I guess I go lower and lower slowly is quite deliberate, because I want space. You know, when you're stalling, you need space. So he pops the aura here. This turn is fairly unfortunate. The aura deflights me, which I knew would happen, but I didn't think it would knock me into the water. So I just end up losing a turn here. So that's a bit of a disaster. I mean, with that extra turn, you know, Cryo would have flashed this open, I would have still been here, and I probably could have, you know, I could have towered, I could have drained, I could have done a lot more than whatever it is I did. So, yeah. Anyway, so that turn was fairly unfortunate. I do manage to sort of get a little bit of control back, but at this point, as you can see, I'm pretty screwed. Like, he could have also Pebble Shotted the Pegasus or and all that, and he decides to go for the flash here. So this flash is also really good because it opens up this space, and I go for the drain to heal up. But at this point, you know, it's once again 4 minions against 1, and this 1 minion is practically dead. Like, I'm trying to stall just with my player versus all 4 minions and him. So what he's done this entire game, he's done a really good job of keeping my minion count low, and he's done a good job of maintaining his advantage. So see, even now, right, he could have Pebble Shotted me, he could have hit me, but once again he decides to develop the swarm and make sure that I have absolutely no access to minions. So at this point, I kind of go for a slightly desperate play. I decide to bring out Dark Knight just to scare him away a little bit. It does a good job. He gets sufficiently scared and walks away. And this gives me a little bit of breathing room, right? There's a few things he could have done. He could have just suicided the Dark Knight, which I actually think would have been a good play as well. The only problem with him doing that is after suiciding the Dark Knight, he only has, you know, Pebble Shot as his strongest damage, and it's a lot easier to store that out. So I think he decides to hold it instead, and it's quite risky. You know, if it messes up for whatever reason, then yeah, he can end up losing the game. So here he doesn't push anymore. He takes a semi-slow turn, and you know, once again he could have come down here and Mega Bolted this Dark Knight, which is what I think a lot of people would have done, or they would have come and Pebble Shotted this Dark Knight from experience. But he takes a fairly slow turn. It's a very methodical anti-stall where he just hits with the aura, and it's actually really devastating. You know, the aura hits the Dark Knight, it hits me, it hits the Pegasus, and I have practically nowhere to go at this point. Right? I'm on 141 HP. I can't even teleport away because anywhere I go, I'm going to be hit with a Mega Boulder. So at this point, I'm sort of committed to staying here, and what I'm thinking is, how the hell do I get out of this situation? And my hopes is he doesn't block this section. I hope he like comes in, detowers, or kills my Dark Knight, and then I'm able to escape to the other side. Having said that, the other side's already kind of been dented and destroyed by pebbles, so it's fairly hard, but it is what it is. So there we go. He pebbles me here. So at this point, I decided to fly out. I thought about Blast from the Past hitting that little pixel there and sinking my own Dark Knight, just because, you know, with how things are going, he's probably going to end up taking this Dark Knight, but I decide not to do it. So I fly over here and just protection shield in midair because, yeah, I mean, I was afraid of Mega Boulder, right? And if I didn't protection shield, he would deflight me with the Swarm, and then Mega Boulder can hit for about 100 to 110, which is, once again, fairly scary. And on this turn, Cryo makes a slight mistake. I mean, he pebble shots me, it sort of misses, and it gives me a little bit of time to breathe, but he's sufficiently in control over the entire map in order for him to make mistakes like these. And the thing is that this entire time he's held onto Mega Boulder, and we'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, so his pebble doesn't do too much here. I decided to just aura his Swarm because I don't want his Swarm to keep hitting me, because it's very, very problematic. So I decided to just aura it because that's his main source of damage. He Drain Bolts here, puts me to 118. I'm now in lethal range of the Mega Boulder. And once again, you see how he doesn't Mega Boulder before Drain Bolting, because if you hold on to Mega Boulder, and you'll see this turn, right? Like let's say I was standing here, and if he didn't have Mega Boulder currently, and I was on 60, 70 health, right, a little bit more than what I'm on at the moment, I could block this with a peg, and then I'd be fine. But the thing is because he has Mega Boulder, and if I were to summon a peg here, he can suicide. He can fly over here, stuff the Mega Boulder against myself and the peg, and the Mega Boulder would not only kill the peg, it would also deal 100 damage to me. So, you know, instead of just using Mega Boulder for 100 damage, he can hold on to it so that it kills both the peg and deals 100 damage. And I think that's the scary bit, is he's not rushing into that situation, because what I would have liked to do is I would have liked to summon a Pegasus, but I can't because I'm still afraid of Mega Boulder here. I do a really desperate play. You know, at this point it's pretty doomed. Let's be honest. And he just goes for more damage, and you know, the entire time he's holding onto Mega Boulder, and you know, it's incredibly frustrating because it's things like this that you know, that help you break stall, because if you hold onto your win condition, and if you hold onto, you know, your execute move, or whatever you want to call it, that makes breaking stall so much stronger in this case. And you see how once again, he could have flown down here and chucked a pebble shot at me, which is what I see a lot of people often do, and doing so might have dealt 30, 40 damage, put me to, you know, like 50 HP, and now drain it back up. And you know, pebble shot's not going to out damage a double drain. Or I could have cast a tree on him. What I was really hoping for was for him to fly down, pebble shot me, and I'll drain him, and then he gates away, and then I plug up this hole with peg, and I have a safe spot within this little containment. But he doesn't let me do that. He blocks the exit. He auras me, and you know, you can once again see, like, his way of breaking stall is to force you into a really confined location, and then auraing that. So tree and aura are the two things that he uses to control, I guess, your space. Because in order to break stall, one thing to keep in mind is that the only difference between the aggressor and the staller is how much space they have on the map, right? When I was stalling on the right side, I had this little location, which is about 1/10 of the map, and he had the entire map to himself. So he had this entire area. So he had about, 15 times my space. So it's important to utilize that space, because when you have that space, that's what allows you to push at advantage. I was also a little bit screwed because my Dark Knight was on 1 health on the other side of the map, and on his turn it would have became a zombie Dark Knight. So if I let that happen and he gets a zombie Dark Knight, I was 100% dead. Now I'm only, by charging that Dark Knight off, I'm only 99% dead. So that was clearly a good move, but it increased our chances of drawing this game by about 1%. And at this point, I mean, he pebbles open, this terrain, and I do have a way to draw here, which is, Cryo has a habit of randomly flashing the draw from time to time. If he decides to do that, and I have my draw up, then obviously we get the draw. Otherwise, we're as good as dead here. The only move I can do here is tower. And I think, I'll block this part with the peg. I was hoping he'll fly over and pebble shot me, and it won't detower, and I'll get a double drain. But he doesn't even do that. He just pebble shots me through the left side, which is once again, which once again does a very good job. And you'll see this. And what's really interesting is Cryo he breaks apart the store without Swarm at all, right? He breaks apart this store with Aura of Decay. He breaks apart the store with Pebble Shot. And he does so, and Mega Boulder as well, of course. Mega Boulder plays a huge part in this. And he does so by keeping pressure up. At this point, I don't really have anything. I throw the Drain, and then he finishes me off with a Pebble Shot. So this game, in my mind, was played really, really well by Cryo. Just from being on the other end. And I think a few moves, the Mega Boulder off the map was a big part. I mean, having Mega Boulder was obviously a big part as well. But a lot of decisions that he made, flashing open the Pegasus, pebbling down when he needed to. I think his mix between using pebbles versus using flash is what allowed him to break the store at the very end, because flash is a more passive and slower way of opening up space. Flash is generally better in the long term, whereas pebble shot is a quick way to get to your opponent and apply pressure. So him mixing those up and using aura and tree as well to limit space is pretty much, what allowed him to break store in the end. So it was a very good game in the end, and I feel like, the reason why I wanted to do a video on this game is because I know there's been a lot of talk about stalling and how you break it, and a lot of my losses, I would say, in the past is just due to book matchup, or it could be due to they might have taken something that I didn't expect. And this game instead, felt as if Cryo just played very, very well. I think it's one of the best games he's played. So yeah, I think hopefully that was enjoyable, and hopefully that was helpful. It was interesting, and yeah, we'll try to do more of these. I always say that, but we'll see what happens.